Welcome and thanks for joining us today. This is our second week of the Leadership of the Future webinar. We're so glad that you can join us today. My name's Gareth Waugh from Class 40 and I'll be your host for this series. So just before we get started, I have a bit of an announcement to share. We're recruiting for Class 44. So one of the changes this year in the recruitment process is that the applicants need to attend one of these sessions. So February 15th, March 16th and April 6th. And then applications will open up on March 15th. Pretty exciting to recruit for Class 44. And then, yeah, we're excited if you can attend one of those sessions so that people can learn about the program. Also an announcement about our next webinar series. In February, we'll talk about improving our ability to navigate conflict and the communicating across different series. In our polarized society, these skills are needed now more than ever. As a reminder, Agforestry's webinars are free and open to all. We'll hope you'll join us and invite your colleagues as well. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you to Debbie Heiser. Debbie's an inspirer, servant leader, organizer, connector, mother, speaker, facilitator, friend, and volunteer. With 30 years of business experience, including leading, managing, and coaching, she now helps entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. Debbie is a thought leader and adjunct professor for Gonzaga University. She is active with community nonprofits and she provides business and leadership coaching as well as a podcast through her business, Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. So before I hand over to Debbie, if we can have you use the Q&A function for questions or the chat, depending, we'll keep an eye on both. So if there's a question that's sort of timely, I'll interrupt. If not, we'll do some of the other questions at the end. So. Thanks again for being us here today, and I'm going to hand you over to Debbie. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Gareth. I appreciate it, and good day to all of you. Thank you for joining us for the second of 3 in the series about servant leadership. I was thrilled when Hannah reached out to me and asked me to come chat with you about servant leadership. Some of you were on last week, others, I'm seeing some new names too, so I'm super excited to see you. Before we get started, however, I want you to start thinking about some questions that you want to ask some of your community, your peers, your colleagues, because we're going to have a panel discussion next week. And I want you to start thinking about and comprising some questions that you want to ask our 3 guests that will be here about how they live out servant leadership in their lives and how they lead in their own organizations. Like, what does it mean to actually apply some of what I'm talking about? And I would also take some of those questions at the end as well. But at the end of this presentation, I'm going to not only allow you to ask questions, but throughout this presentation, I want you, as you come up with those questions, to throw them in the chat, and Gareth and Hannah will help pull those together. If you're listening to this, you can send an email to Hannah with the question, and then we'll also have the chat available next week. Okay, Rosa says she can't hear anything. So Gareth, I'm going to ask you to maybe chat with her in the chat box about that. Can everybody else hear me? Can somebody give some feedback that you can hear? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure before we moved on. But again, if you would think about some of your questions that you would have for some of your colleagues, throw those in the chat throughout this presentation. Gareth will be pulling those together so that we can also give them to our panel and we can talk about those. We will offer up the opportunity to ask next week as well on the chat, and we'll have a few questions to start us out, but do give some thought to that. Now, before we jump in, I want to do just a little bit of a review. So does anyone remember any of the 5 characteristics we discussed last Tuesday? And if you did, throw it in the chat. No one remembers any of the 5 characteristics? Okay, good. Thanks, Julia. Healing, empathy, good. Yep, listening, good. There's 3. Okay, as we're looking at this week as servant leaders in training, we're going to look at the next 5 characteristics. Now, the first 5 were pretty straightforward. And I'd really love to know that, oh good, awareness and commitment to the growth of people. Thank you, Jennifer. I'd really like to know was there anything you did differently this week when it came to listening to people because of what we talked about? Anything you did differently by showing empathy or understanding and being more empathetic to people? Was there anything around being self-aware and aware of others, or maybe how you saw some healing in yourself, or how transactional analysis or the victim game helped you? And or what or how did you change the way you approach the growth of people? Good, you spoke to a homeless person. That's fantastic. So I do want to step back for just a second and go back to healing for just a second. Sometimes healing is passed on through generations. So be patient with yourself and to those around you. It sticks in your body. Good, you related to your spouse. You tried to listen, excuse me, opposed to formulating your response. Now, sometimes, as I mentioned, healing passes on through generation to generation, or even things that need to be healed. Louise Hay does a lot of work around how we hold emotions in our bodies and how holding emotions in our bodies can create dis-ease. And that dis-ease results in disease. So I would highly recommend, there's a book and it'll be on the resource list called The Body Keeps the Score. And then also you can Google The Alchemy of Healing by Louise Hay. And she goes into different things that potentially are happening within your body. And there's a reason I'm bringing this up. As we get into Foresight, we're going to talk about tuning into our bodies to see what's coming. But I want to tell a quick story, a couple of things, just to give you an indication of what I'm talking about with this. Right after I got divorced, I went on this hike to Gold Hill here, and it's a 6-mile round trip hike. And the first 3 miles are up and they traverse pretty steeply. And I decided I was going to do this. I always carry a first aid pack with me. I didn't have my first aid pack. So of course I was rubbing a blister, which also means something. But as I'm walking up this trail and it's starting to kind of rain, so it's getting muddy, and I'm thinking about all sorts of things. Sometimes my feet felt super light and like I could go for miles. And other times my feet felt like I had cement blocks wrapped around them. And so when I got back, I looked it up, and it was really interesting to me because feet problems represented the fear of moving forward. So in this case, I was processing through some of my divorce, and here's that fear of moving forward. Another example, I was a CFO for a small business that we did medical billing. So obviously during 2020, we were experiencing some losses, and every month at the end of the month, my lower back would start to hurt. So when I looked that up, I found that that was feeling not supported from a financial perspective and fear of finances. So it's really intriguing, at least it is to me, to look at these things that happen within our bodies and how those can tell us messages about what's happening. So let's dig in and look at the next 5. And I'm going to come back to a few things I just pointed out to you later as we get into the rest of the characteristics. But let's look at the best test again of what servant leadership means. So Hannah, if you would move on in the slide. The servant leader is a servant first. It begins with that natural feeling that we have that we want to serve. That conscious choice then brings one to aspire to lead. And I've talked to many leaders too, that they're like, I kind of fell into leadership by accident. The best test is, do those served grow as persons? And do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to be servants? And what is the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit or at least not be further deprived? Now, afterwards, after last week, what are some ways, and I'd love to see this in the chat, and the book I was suggesting is there's one called, Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, but you can also look up her Alchemy of Healing. And the other one was called The Body Keeps the Score. The Body Keeps the Score is a little more academic, but it's also a really good one. But I'd love to see in the chat, if you would think about, how are you starting to see servant leadership a little bit differently? How are you seeing the word servant a little differently than maybe once before you actually sat through last week? And throw that in the chat. I'd love to see some of that. I also want to talk about the last sentence of this kind of test. because it takes on a whole new meaning as we look at the last few years, as we look at privilege, as we look at culture and biases, as we look at and realize that as a servant leader in training, if we don't have the perspective of others from different races, cultures, social economic statuses, the size of families, the different spiritual backgrounds that people have, if we don't have that perspective to offer up, then it's really important as leaders to start a generative dialogue. So that level 4 listening, not a downloading of your own opinions, but really getting into a generative dialogue so you can be advised and make the best decisions. Now, this is also really imperative as you change things in your organization. Many times we forget to ask the people doing the job what would work best, and we just try to solve it on our own. So use the collective wisdom of the group, use the collective wisdom of the organization that you're in, the team that you lead, by asking those who do the job to be involved. And yes, it may take a bit more time in the front. However, it will really save you a ton of time and duration, and the employees that helped create the process or the product have more buy-in into it. So it's seeking a win-win there. Now, I want to shamelessly plug here the certificate in servant leadership course. The next one actually starts tomorrow. There is still time to register if you would like to register. We do it twice a year, and it goes into more depth in each of these 10 characteristics if you're interested. So please take a look at that. So let's dig in, look at the last 5 characteristics, and really keep in mind, again, a caveat that most of these have multiple of these have semester-long classes that are built around the characteristic. So again, we're just touching on them and remembering too that there's certain things like courage and resiliency and growth mindset that are really interwoven in with these 10. So this week, we're looking at some that may not be as obvious to you. Thank you, Gareth, for putting that link in there. Conceptualization. Now, when I say the word conceptualization, type into the chat, and I'm going to ask about all of these. So what does conceptualization really mean? Like in your mind, do you have an idea of what this might look like? And what does foresight mean? I teach a class called Foresight and Strategy for the master's level, and people come into it thinking, oh, we're going to do predictions, we're going to look at strategy and all sorts of things, and it's very different. What about stewardship? Imagining what the end looks like. Good, thank you. What does persuasion really mean? And what does it mean to build community, particularly in today's day and age? Thank you, Tim and Tammy, for adding some things there. And Diana, having a vision for what can happen, putting ideas into action. Absolutely. So let's dig into these 5 without further ado. Let's jump into, and if you could, Hannah, switch for me to conceptualization. Now, conceptualization is really about starting to see the future. And Diana, you're right, like having that vision. And when we start to see the future, that's when we start to get into foresight. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But I want you to think and try to answer the question around your part of the organization. And it's a little bit of a magic wand question, but if you had it all your way, how would it be? Now, this works really good in relationships too. Some of you put spouse interaction with listening in there. This one works really well too. Like if you're starting to discuss something, okay, if you had it all your way, how would it be? And then be open to hearing and answering that same question yourself. Now, when you think about your organization and what's happening today in your organization, what are some things that if you had it all your way, you would do the same? What are some things that maybe you would do slightly different? Throw a few of those, what would be slightly different that you would do in managing or leading your department or your organization or your teams. Okay, I don't always see the vision. It's revealed incrementally to me because I just always keep moving forward. Yeah, and I will say too, Diana, not to go on a tangent here, but that's what I call faith. Faith is having an understanding of kind of where you're headed, but you trust that when you take the first step, the next step will appear. So good, thank you for bringing that up. Respecting all views, good. Now, that may be slightly different than what's there now. And what I would ask, really is a question I would ask, is why can't you start doing some of those things today? Right? You have the ability as a leader to start making some of the changes that you might want to do slightly different. Close the gap on time and start moving into that. And then I would ask too, what's your company vision? And a lot of people struggle a little bit looking into the vision. They have a hard time articulating what the vision and the mission of the company is in their own words. And so if it's about the organization, like, people struggle looking 3, 5, and 10 years out. Somebody mentioned earlier, having the vision is somewhat of a struggle. But looking at your company, do you know the vision and the mission of your company? And have you taken the time to put it into your own words so it means something to you and your teams? And then also, how about your own vision for your career and your life? Now, I'm going to shamelessly plug what I do because this is my lane of genius. So as a reminder, all of you have a 30-minute free complimentary call with me as a gift to help you gain some clarity. So take advantage of it. Go to www.leadyourlituplife.com and schedule a call. I'd love to chat with you about it. But it's really important to take your company vision, your company mission, the values that your company has, interpret those for yourself, match them up to your own values and mission and purpose in life. But then even more importantly, it's about helping your team understand that and put it into words that they understand. Also taking and helping your team understand what's their bigger purpose in life. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit, and I'll go back to this here in a minute. Yes, sometimes it is difficult, Gareth, to digest the vision and mission into daily activities and work. And that's where actual business planning with strategies and tactics help with that. But I want to stop for a minute and talk about expectations. And towards the end of the slide, I have on here, because conceptualization also relies on expectations. And are you setting clear expectations? I find sometimes that we tend to assume as leaders that people get it. Situational leadership, which is done by Ken Blanchard, is a great model for helping you understand when people need higher direction and when they need higher support. Many times we as servant leaders in training, our preference is to offer support, but sometimes people need higher direction on things. As an example, I had multiple sites, but my site in Kansas City, I had 2 trainers that managed, or 2 training managers that managed trainers. And Missy came into my office and became a trainer when we were doing end of the year evaluations. So I had her sit in and listen to how I gave feedback to people and how I walked through their end of the year evaluation. The next year rolled around and we all talked through the process. We talked through dates and we all left. Missy came back into my office and she's like, did you forget that I haven't done this before? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I forgot. We sat down. I gave her more direction on what the process was, how to do the process, what she wanted to look out for, things that she wanted to do differently. What support did she need from me to do that? And so it's really important to think about where your people are at with a task, not them as what their preference is necessarily, but the task itself. And I highly recommend looking up situational leadership too, because it's really helpful. Now, when you think about this alignment meeting that I put out here, alignment from a conceptualization perspective helps you both be not only at the same game, but in the same bleachers, right? Or not only in the same book, but the same chapter. So it's really important. And I've used this many times, and I did it quarterly, even when I was managed remotely, is you want to answer these questions for yourself, but then also get the questions answered from your employee, asking them, what do you need from me to be successful? And then sharing with them what you need for you to be successful. Then what don't you need from me, or what are you receiving from me that you don't need? Because if you don't need it, why are we doing it? And then last, what aren't you receiving that you'd like to receive in the future? And it's really important that you don't take things personally here, that you step back, otherwise you won't get that feedback. So those alignment meetings are really helpful when it comes to expectations and walking through some of that as you're conceptualizing a vision and wanting to get to that vision. Now, if you don't have a vision and mission and team values, and I know I'm talking to multiple people here, so you might have part of an organization, you might have a team of people. It's really important to think about your own vision and mission for your team. What sets your team apart from others in the organization? What does your team want to be known for? Do they want to be known for having the best internal customer service, the best external customer service, the best quality of product, the best compliance? What does that look like? You know, for your own team. So answer that for yourself. But then how do you move on this? Because if you haven't yourself articulated your vision for your team, then your team doesn't have buy-in into it. So as a leader, it's important to cast vision that ties to the company vision, and then get your team's input on how you go about moving into those mission and values. So have them help with your guidance. Now, as an example, I know that I help people achieve their hopes, wishes, and dreams because I help business people lead their business instead of the business running their life. And that way, the business is a conduit to them of going after those hopes, wishes, and dreams that they had when they started as an entrepreneur. That's my purpose. And I do that through connecting people, teaching people, and help people process through and heal. And so I would ask, what's yours? And if you don't know, spend some time on that. Sign up for one of those calls, but then take that to the team level. What's each of your team's personal mission? Like each individual there, what is their mission, values, and purpose in this world? Now, tying that in to then what your team does and what you do as an organization. I didn't just sell yellow pages way back in the day. I helped business clients achieve their hopes, wishes, and dreams by bringing them more clients. It's got to be bigger for people to feel super engaged. Now, tying this in brings huge ramifications to employee retention, employee satisfaction, employee engagement, and overall happiness, which is really important in today's day and age based on the last webinar that we did and talked about some of those results. So part of this then is moving into Foresight. And so Hannah, if you would switch to the Foresight slide. Foresight is about what direction are we going, where are we heading, but then being open to the possibility. So switch to the next slide for me, Hannah, if you would, please. Foresight is really different than prediction. How many of you, and throw in the chat yes for me, how many of you use a lot of predictive data for the business that you're in, whether that be cycles that you have, buying cycles, selling cycles? Like I know as a prediction, I live in North Idaho. I know, given data from the past, that every January we're going to get dumped on, and I typically don't ski before Christmas. That's just a prediction based on past data. Yeah, so each of you use prediction models. Some of you may or may not use them so much from a financial perspective, but there's all sorts of models that we can take past data to help predict some future outcomes potentially. Foresight is different. Foresight, and before we watch the clip, Hannah, I'm going to walk through a little bit more of this slide. So Foresight is about tuning in. It's about integrating your mind. Now, not getting rid of your mind. How many of you, and throw yes in the comments, have tried to meditate, but you've been told to get out of your mind? And so therefore when you say get out of your mind, then you stay in your mind because you're processing so hard to stay out of your mind. We want to integrate. Yeah, Julia, you hear me. So it's about integrating the mind, because what's coming into the mind is important. It's also about your heart. What are you, and the heart is actually smarter than the brain. The Heart Math Institute is doing some really intriguing research about the heart and what it tells us before the mind even has a chance to process it. And then it's about getting in tune with our bodies. So I was talking about bodies earlier. And if something's bothering you, usually you can tune in. And if you feel stiffness or you feel an ache or a pain, there's something to that. Now, there's also our intuitive capabilities. Some call this spirit. I'm going to let you call it whatever you want to, but it's about integrating our mind, our body, our heart, and our intuition. Yeah, your mind wants to take a nap when you meditate. That's funny. Sorry, I kind of scrolled out and saw that. But you want to integrate all four of those pieces of you, because when we slow down, then it allows us to speed up, and that is counterintuitive. So it's about taking deep breaths. It's about listening internally. And we talked about the 4 levels of listening. It's about seeing the field. Sometimes, now years ago, and I'm aging myself too, I think it was back in the 90s, maybe, they came out with these posters, it might've been 2000s, where it was just all these geometric shapes. And if you stared at them long enough, you started to see things in the poster. That's about soft eyes, like looking for things that aren't necessarily right there, listening softly, listening to what's not being said. And so in order to slow down, to speed up, we need to take breaths, we need to listen deeply, and we need to look for that authentic move, that ability to know this is the direction we want to go into. And I hope all of you have had a chance sometime to be out in nature and feel it drop in. I know some of you are forestry people, so like you get this beautiful thing of being out in the trees, maybe more than some of us, but like having something drop in and you just know it's the right way to go. Forest bathing. I love that, Kelly. I'm going to steal that. Shamelessly steal that, by the way. So I have a link here that Hannah's going to take us out to, but before we go out to that, I'm going to ask you to turn your volume all the way up. So whether that's through your Zoom volume or the volume on your computer or on your phone, I haven't found another clip that is louder, but we're going to watch a small movie clip from The Legend of Bagger Vance about seeing the field. So Hannah, if you would take us to that, and let's watch that, and stop at 5:30, if you would. And it's not, there we go.
Greatest game there is. Right, Hardy?
Yes, sir.
The greatest game there will ever be.
Just you and the ball.
All by your lonesome. I think it's time.
Time for what?
Time for you to see the field.
The field? I see the field, but it's 445 yards long. It's got a little red flag at the end of it. It's 12 strokes ahead of me. Come on.
That ain't it. Because if you was seeing the field, you wouldn't be hacking at that ball like you was chopping weeds out from under your front porch.
Just give me the club.
Sorry I brought it up. Here, you gonna take that hack away.
All right, what's the field?
Fix your eyes on Bobby Jones.
He's a piece of work here right now.
Whoa, give the man room. Man room. Knock it out there, Bobby.
Look at his practice swing. Almost like it's searching for something. Then he finds it. Watch how he settle himself right into the middle of it. Feel that focus. And he got a lot of shots he could choose from. Duffs and tops and skulls. There's only one shot that's in perfect harmony with the field. One shot that's his. Authentic shot. And that shot is going to choose him. There's a perfect shot out there trying to find each and every one of us. All we got to do is get ourselves out of its way let it choose us. Look at him. He in the field. You can't see that flag as some dragon you got to slay. You have to look with soft eyes. See the place where the tides and the seasons and the turning of the earth all come together. Where everything that is becomes one. You got to seek that place with your soul, Junior. Seek it with your hands. Don't think about it. Feel it. Your hands is wiser than your head ever gonna be. Now, I can't take you there, Junior. Just hopes I can help you find a way. It's just you, that ball, that flag, and all you are. Seek it with your hands. Don't think about it. Feel it. Looking at it, Junior. Feel it. It's just
There's
you.
only one shot that's in perfect
ball,
harmony. We don't see that.
It's the home of your authentic swing. That flag, and all that you are.
Even the blind squirrel finds an acorn now and then, Bobby.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. Now, part of that is around seeing with soft eyes, meaning like taking a pause. Sometimes we get so into the day-to-day workings that we're just moving forward, moving forward, moving forward. And sometimes we just need to take a breath and just take that pause. Had some additional 40s music back there.
The rest of that.
Perfect. Okay. So slow down to speed up, take a deep breath and listen internally. Then I also want to talk to you. I know many of you probably even wear headlamps to work, but how many of you have ever camped before and you had a headlamp and you got up in the middle of the night, and where do you go? You go where the lamp is shining. So wherever your focus is where the light shines and where you go. And that's why too, when I talked about listening, that words are so important, because it's important to understand that nothing is random and everything is relevant. We can get messages from all over the place. I actually literally schedule into my schedule at least once a month to get out in nature and go do a nature walk, where I just go for 20 minutes and I listen to my thoughts. Sometimes I stop and just listen to what's around me, feel what's around me, and I gain all of these messages from what's happening there. So it's almost like a meditation in a different way, but it's about really taking the time to slow down. And so I have this 4 breaths presencing practice that I would like to do. And it's a little harder because I can't see you. And if you're driving or using equipment, please do not close your eyes, but you can follow along with the breathing. But for those of you that are sitting at a desk, if you're somewhere where you can close your eyes, I want you to take a moment And I want you to ground and center. I want you to close your eyes. And when I talk about a third eye, that's in your forehead between your two eyes. And I know some of you said you struggle with meditation. I just want you to follow along as we go through this. So please close your eyes, ground and center yourself. And when you're ready, I want you to breathe normally until I instruct you otherwise. And I want you to focus your intention and the attention of your first breath. It's for our oneness. And I want you to bring to mind all the blessings and grace we are in most need of for the well-being of our oneness, our physical, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual self. And I want you to pause in your breathing because this is where the transformation starts. And now inhale from all directions, all the blessings and grace we are in most need of. And now pause and purify those needs in your heart. And exhale healing and blessings in all directions through every sphere of our oneness. And now again, breathing normally until you're instructed otherwise. Focus the intention and the attention of our second breath on all those whom we love. And bring to mind all the blessings and grace we are in most need of for the well-being of our oneness and for all whom we love, spouses, partners, children, grandchildren, siblings and their families, mothers, fathers, grandparents, all of our marital and blood relations. And now pause and inhale from all directions, all the blessings and grace we and they are in most need of. And pause and purify those needs in your heart. And now exhale healing and blessings in all directions to all those whom we love and serve. And now breathing normally again until instructed otherwise. Focus the intention and attention of our third breath on the well-being of all of our known relationships. Bring to mind all the blessings and grace that we are in most need of for the well-being of our oneness, for all whom we love, and all those we are in relationship with, those we know and have known, all those we interact with, all individuals and groups, and even those we might not care for, and especially those who come to mind now. And now pause and inhale from all directions, all the blessings and grace we and they are in most need of. And pause and exhale healing and blessings in all directions to all whom we know and serve. And now breathing normally until instructed otherwise. Focus the intention and attention of our fourth breath on the well-being of all that is. And bring to mind all the blessings and grace we are in most need of for the well-being of our oneness, for all whom we love, and all whom we are in relationship with, and all that is, all people, especially those who suffer, and even those who may wish to harm us, those who have passed, and those yet to be, all animals, all living things, the entire earth and beyond, to all that is and is not. And now pause and inhale from all directions, all the blessings and grace we and they are in most need of. And now pause and exhale healing and blessings in all directions to all whom we serve, the known and the unknown. And now pause and breathe normally, but momentarily rest in profound awareness of our connectedness with all our relations, inspired by gratitude, joy, compassion, and generosity. And when you're ready, wiggle your hands and toes and return to the present. This is a 4-breath presencing practice that my mentor, Dr. Horsman, developed. And it's something I do periodically throughout the day. I don't necessarily go through the whole thing at certain times. Other times I do this whole thing. I actually taped myself doing it so I could listen as well as doing it in my mind. And Tammy, I can absolutely share it with you. I actually have a video that I did for a program that I have. And so I'll send that to Hannah so that you can also use it. But it takes 2 minutes and it allows you to slow down, and hopefully you've even centered a little bit more as you did that practice. Now, I mentioned too about the 4-breath presencing practice, and thank you, Tammy, for letting me know about it. It just helps ground. I do this with a lot of groups that I'm in, and you can just see what happens. They just drop in. Now, again, nothing is random and everything is relevant. There are messages all around us. And for me, nature is a big one for that I mentioned earlier. But look at it. You know, there are certain things that sometimes we see something, but it'll come back to us later. Sometimes we have an idea and it will come back to us later. It's important to identify and acknowledge those things and build a culture with your teams, because they might have something come to them, but they're afraid to come talk to you about it, just of their own beings. Not that you're a person that they're afraid of, but like they're afraid to come forward with it because it might seem random, or it might seem silly, or they judge it or compare it. And so, but it might create huge positive ramifications for your team and your organization. So allow for that ability for people to listen deeply within themselves. And the last thing I wanted to talk about here is collective wisdom. It's really important to understand that as a collective, we know more than we do individually. And so if we have a decision to make, again, go back to the people doing the job, talk about it, allow that collective wisdom to happen so that you can take the best of 5 brains and put it into the best process versus 1 brain trying to implement a process. So hopefully that made sense. Feel free to give me some feedback because I can go on and on Foresight for a long time. So let's move on though to stewardship. And when I say the word stewardship, what comes to your mind? Throw some things in the chat that you think stewardship might stand for. Maybe everyone fell asleep. Yeah, sharing, thank you. Caring for something, recognition, good. Land management, absolutely, Tim. Long-term view, thank you. All of those are correct. Go ahead and switch to the next slide for me. It's really, thank you, Diane. You just segued me in, taking care of those things, people, and responsibilities in our sphere. Absolutely. So Hannah, go ahead and move to the next stewardship slide. It's about care and responsibility, planning of resources. So anything involved with resources, whether that be economic, financial, budgets, fiscal responsibilities, procurement. So I'm giving you some ideas there with the economic, financial piece of it. Then we have the environment. Many of you, if not all of you, are deeply involved with our environment. And it's about care and responsibility and planning of the resources. There's the health of anything, right? Health of your employees, health of the organization, health of a forest, health of the crop that you're growing, health of the dairy farms that you're dealing with, anything that revolves around the health. It's also about being a good steward of the property that you have, whether that be intellectual property or whether that be physical property that you own. It's also around information, being a good steward of information. This also relates to personal relationships. You know, there's a lot of times that I hear people talking about other people's stories. It's not their place to talk about that other person's story. And so being a good steward of information around that as well. So again, care and responsibility and planning of resources, tending to all of these different things. Now, Otto Scharmer out of MIT, and I have this book on the resource list as well, talks about the 3 divides, and he talks about it being icebergs, because an iceberg, you see the tip of it, but you don't see all of the back. Yeah, Kelly, the concept of the vault. Absolutely. You are correct about the information. So the 3 icebergs, or the 3 divides, are 3 things that as leaders, we really want to take into consideration as we make decisions. So not just about our organization, but these 3 things are really about the social divide, the social economic divide. When we think about the social divide, this goes back to even Robert Greenleaf's best test. But if we think about sometimes even the polarization that's been happening lately, how is it impacting the economic piece of it? How is it impacting the social? There's a great movie out there called The Social Dilemma that talks about how it started out with a good intention, but they didn't look below the iceberg of other situations that could happen. They didn't put the black hats on to say what could potentially happen negatively if we make this decision. And that's important to do. Now, when we talk about social economics as well, that I just find this to be so fascinating that if we live in the United States, we are 10%. We're already in the top 10% of the world. And then also in the US, 1% of the people have the highest, greatest net worth than 90% of the world. So we live in a very blessed community, but it gives you that indication of how polarized we are on some things. Then around the ecological divide, and Diane, yeah, as a caregiving person, you struggle to reconcile your ethics of sharing for the benefit of all. Absolutely. And here's what I will say to you. Like, I have permission from my ex-husband to share our story, which includes addiction, and that's his story to tell. If you have permission from the person, that's different because it is about helping someone else and you can share your experience. But if you're sharing someone else's experience, that's not being a good steward of information that they potentially told you in trust or in confidence. So when we look at the social divide and look at those sorry, I kind of scrolled off there for a second, but look at that social economic divide. It's important to take that into consideration as you look at making decisions in your organization. The second one is the ecological divide, which I know a lot of you spend time in already, but we as a world are using 1.5 times the amount of resources that one planet can provide. And so I so appreciate and respect all that you're doing in this world because I know you're making an impact in that as well. Then there's the spiritual cultural divide, this understanding that what's happening is there's starting to be a divide between our big S selves and who we are and how we maneuver in the world, this whole purpose piece of it. How many of you have ever felt depression or burnout in your jobs? I have. That's this idea of separation from our spiritual or cultural upbringing and feeling grounded, right? Our actions and our words, who we are they in congruence to who we are? And that's really important. So stewardship is all about taking care of those things. Let's move on to the next one, which is about persuasion. Now, I will tell you, I could go on and on about this one, and I won't in the essence of time, but feel free to move to the next slide for me, Hannah. How strong are your influence skills? Now, there's a link here, and I might ask Garrett to actually put this in the chat for me. And this is a really cool little resource that you can go out and take a little skills quiz about how strong are your influence skills. And what I love about influence and persuasion and sales, basically, is that everything in life is a sales call. If you think about it, let's say you go home and someone that you live with at your house, or if you're single, a friend, you decide to go out to dinner. And you have a particular place that you want to go to dinner. You're persuading or giving influence to where you want to go to dinner. Now, I do think we should open up a restaurant that says, I don't care, as the title, because how many times do you ask someone, where do you want to go for dinner? Oh, I don't care. Where do you want to go? And it takes 15 minutes to figure it out. Yeah, thank you, Christina. You're hearing me there. But really, we're in an influence mode all of the time. And so what's your sales story? Many times people have negative impressions about sales. For me, I look at sales as love. If I have a service that I know I can help people with, why wouldn't I want to share that with somebody? And it's okay to get paid for it. So it's about thinking too about the sales and persuasion and how we influence people as an act of love. Thank you, Gareth. As an act of love of how we're going to influence someone to move forward. So there's a really good video out there, and I'm not going to go through each of these bullets just in the essence of time, but I highly recommend it. Just YouTube, the science of persuasion, or not YouTube, geez, Google the science of persuasion. And they go through, it's about a 15-minute video about how ethics are important, how like ethics are important through each of these sciences of that we go through with persuasion, but reciprocity, like we tend to be persuaded because someone gives to us first. Scarcity, sometimes if things are going away, we'll purchase them more. If we have authority, we like to follow the lead of a credible, logical expert. We like to have consistency. People like to be consistent. They're asking for small initial commitments as they go on. They like to say yes to people that they like, people that are similar to us, people that pay compliments to us, that type of thing. And then consensus, like look at the actions and behaviors of others to determine their own behavior. So there's a whole little video out there that I do highly recommend. The last part of this is the push-pull model. And this is around, do I push people to greatness by persuading and asserting? Yes, there's persuasion that happens, and you have to have that portion of it. Then there's also about pulling people, pulling others to yourself, this whole law of attraction by bridging and attracting people to you. So those are just a few things about persuasion and influence that hopefully will be helpful to you with your teams. The last one is about building community. And it's so important, especially now in building community with people. How do you build connection in the workplace? And a lot of people struggled with this as more and more people went virtually. But how do you, I'm going to ask you to throw things in the chat and share with your peers, not your peels, your peers. How do you build connection with each other in the workplace? Now, I want to tell you too, it has a cost, because if we don't build connection, everybody wants to belong. If we help people feel like they belong, then it adds to the bottom line. When people are disengaged, it's costing between $450 and $550 billion each year. And this is a Gallup research that's been done around this. And they also found that high engagement leads to 17% higher productivity, 20% higher sales, and 21% higher profitability. So it does make an impact. Now, some of it's fun and games, but it's not all fun and games. It's about building this culture. It's about giving back together, going out in your community and serving in your community together. It's about having authentic, honest communication. It's about setting up boundaries. It's about knowing that you're going to be honest with them as a leader, that you're going to have the tough conversations with them when it needs to happen. Nothing loses more trust, because trust is huge in this. Nothing loses more trust than when you let a non-performing employee continue to stay with the organization or continue to do the work at a lesser performance so that everybody else in the team has to pick that up. And I know that many of us have been in those situations. So have those tougher conversations and look at it as being honest and authentic with them. Stay out of the victim game. As we build relationship with people, it's important. And that's where that authenticity comes in play as well. Yeah, thank you, Heather. You're very open about yourself. You share examples and insights. That's great. Yeah, Diana, that's great too. Nothing works better than breaking bread together, right? I remember one time a team building exercise that we did, and I know it's slightly different with COVID now. We actually went to a culinary school, and they had a team building exercise where you had to create a meal together based on whatever was in your box. And so that's kind of fun to do. So think of some fun things to do, purposeful things to build your community as well. Some of that also is understanding people that have different viewpoints as you. Okay, so with that, that's the last 5. And if you want to learn more, I'm going to again shamelessly plug Gonzaga again. It's a fantastic program. Talk to Hannah if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about it as well. And then I'm going to open it up these last few minutes. Please put any questions you might have for the panel. We have about 5 minutes and Gareth is going to wrap us up. But yeah, Diana, the link to connect with me, I will throw here in the chat. But if you would give Gareth and Hannah some questions in the chat that you want to ask your peers next week. And if you think of them throughout the week, feel free to send them to Hannah. And then we will have our panel discussion next week. What questions do you have of me?
Thanks, Debbie. Just while we're waiting for some of those questions in the chat, I just wanted to share that I really love the in the conceptualization slide, the expectations and alignment meeting. I often ask my people, well, what do you need from me? But I don't stop and say, well, what don't you need from me? And
Yeah.
from receiving that. And so, yeah, that's going to be helpful going forward.
Good. Thank you, Gareth. And I would challenge you too to answer that question back. When you say, what do you need from me to be successful? Then say, here's what I need from you.
Right. I like that. Give that a go. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think it was Diana that wanted to know how to get in touch with me. Yeah, Diane, I have thrown the www.leadyourlituplife.com in there too.
Perfect. And is that how we access your podcast too, Debbie?
You can access the podcast through there if you want to. It is on all of the major elements out there. So Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, YouTube, you can look it up as well if you want to see the video version. And one week I do the teaching. The next week I have someone that's leading their lit up life and I interview them. So.
Very cool.
Okay, here we go. How will we get the breathing exercise? Tammy, I will get it to Hannah and we'll probably email it to you, or I'll just create a Google link that you can get to it as well.
Great. Thanks, Debbie.
Any tips on being a better listener? Does the art behind you say anything at all? Oh, the artwork behind me says life is an adventure or nothing at all. Thank you. I need a stand-up desk so you can see that entire thing. Thank you for asking, Tim. Any other questions you have for the panelists or for me? How do you engage the profoundly disengaged and resistant to change? Diane, I want you to ask that to the panel as well, but here's what I will tell you. I just have an authentic conversation with them. I don't even talk about the work. I'm just like, what's going on with you as a person? I've noticed you've been disengaged, feels like there's some resistance. Let's talk about that. Because usually it's not anything to do with the work. And we can talk more about that too if you sign up for a call.
Perfect. Well, appreciate everybody's time today and appreciate all those questions. We're looking forward to a panel discussion next week. And thank you all for attending today. Thank you so much, Debbie. I got a whole page of notes and things to learn and think about. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us and we'll see you next week. Take care. Have a good week all. Thank you.
Thank you.